Welcome, everyone, to Color Commentary. We are your pauper commentators, Michael Petchick and Adrian Barzales. How's it going, Adrian?
It's me. I'm good.
It's going all right, yeah.
Yeah, it's going well.
We are not brought to you in video this week. We heard your feedback, and we decided, maybe we pull back on the video until we've got a little bit more to add in.
Yeah, we're going back to the drawing board on that one. I think overall the reaction was positive. Definitely got some notes though, and I just don't think we're quite comfortable continuing that until we iron out some of the kinks and maybe get a little bit more content going in the actual video itself.
Yeah, we want to be able to make sure that there's a justification for it outside, like both for the viewer. So, you have a reason you might actually want to watch the YouTube version over your podcast ripper. And also on top of that, like we want to make sure that, we're putting out. It took me longer than usual to produce that last episode, and it wasn't for a whole lot of gain, right? Like,
right.
Trying to make sure I optimize my time.
You were just looking at me trying not to pick my nose for an hour.
All right. So first up on the list, and most important, I feel.
Drum roll.
Drum roll. I'm not sure the mics picked that up, but we want to send a huge shout out to Aaron Kane of Aaron Kane Deck Boxes. He contacted us late Friday or Thursday, I think. And for those who don't know, Aaron Kane makes custom deck boxes and cube boxes and collection boxes, and they are number one. They are gorgeous, like all wood, all handmade. Like you can customize them to the ends of the earth. And he decided to make some for community people whose content he likes. And we got up there with some pretty big names.
Yeah, we were very, very honored. And, I'm not the most religious person out there, but I did hear a rumor that he was one of the contractors who worked on the Ark. So make of that what you will.
But in all seriousness,
craftsmanship is beautiful.
Yeah, gorgeous craftsmanship. And, I think I was joking with you. We're the only ones who don't have thousands of followers on assorted social media, and we're the small guys.
Yeah, we were definitely the smallest cast up there, but apparently size matters not. So thank you so much, Aaron. It's a beautiful, beautiful gift, and we're very grateful.
Honestly, one of the neatest things that has ever come of this podcast was just out of the blue, someone being like, "Hey, I can't really pay you for your work, but let me give back to the show in another way."
Right.
And holy crap.
Yeah. Wow.
I'm trying very hard. We have a no swearing policy on the show, and I'm trying very, very hard not to curse because I'm over the moon about this.
Yeah, it's great. Thank you, Aaron.
So today is all black everything. We're talking about mono black.
Yeah, and it's been a big topic of discussion on Reddit at our local metagame. Sort of the word on everyone's mind right now is, where is mono black control? We talked about it during the Drake era as being one of the decks that we were pretty sure was going to bounce back, but that hasn't been the case. There aren't really any mono black decks 5-0ing. The deck we have today is a 5-0 mono black deck, but it's from the end of November.
Yeah, it's been a while. I'm actually going to start off with some statistics just so we can kind of illustrate this in a numerical fashion.
Okay.
Because we started off on talking about its metagame share. So through the Oath of the Gatewatch season, it was about 6.46% of the metagame, which is decent. That's a top tier.
It was going to be one of the top 8 pictures you saw on MTG Goldfish.
Yeah, you don't have to go to the Seymour results. Which, by the way, right now on MTG Goldfish, it is the 21st deck you will see.
Wow.
Yeah,
it's pretty far down.
So then Shadows over Innistrad hits. It's 8.1% of the meta. Then EMA hits. It drops to 2.11% of the meta.
And this is Drake crowding it out because mono black can't really interact with them in a meaningful way.
Eldritch Moon hits. We drop down to 1.6%. Kaladesh hits. It's down to 1.1%.
Just down and down and down she goes.
And since the Drake banning, so Kaladesh 2.0, 1.31%. So barely an upswing.
And special thanks to Alex Ullman for those statistics. He pulled those for us right before the show.
Yeah, I literally hit him up and I was just like, I need some stats quick. But it just hasn't come back in the way that a lot of people expected it would.
And the mid-range deck that's sort of popped up is Boros Tokens.
Well, let's get into this list. So,
Okay.
so Mono Black Control for a long time has been all about casting gray merchants and a bunch of disruption. Like you've always joked, it's just gray ogres with upside.
Yeah. most of it's creature based. So
Yeah, it's mostly creatures. Not super aggressive.
Also, Chittering Rats may hold. It's on some sort of hierarchy of the most annoying card to play against in the format. So,
not to sidetrack too much, there is currently a deck that flickers it infinitely.
yeah, Rat Lock.
Yeah, it's
Thanks, Seth.
It's a doozy. But let's get into this list. So we've got 4 copies of Chittering Rats.
Normal
1 and 2 black. 2/2. When it ETBs, a player puts a card from their hand on top of their library. A virtual time walk sometimes.
Yeah, it is terrible.
It's also coincidentally the reason why as soon as you start seeing swamps, you should not be holding land drops no matter what.
Yeah,
because
definitely.
It's going to be bad. Then we got a copy main deck of Fairy Macabre, and this is usually sideboard tech. It's 1 and 2 black for a 2/2 flyer, and it has the ability discard it from your hand, exile 2 cards from a graveyard.
Yes, this was very popular in the Drake era because it was an instant speed way for black to interact with their combo at no mana
also
cost.
Not even black. Like if you don't plan on ever casting this,
That's true.
You can run it in whatever, and it's just a free instant speed stop your combo.
And here you have a 2/2 beater if you don't ever want to use it.
Exactly.
And graveyard matters enough in Pauper that you probably want to exile stuff out of your opponent's graveyard in those matchups.
Exactly. 3 copies of Liliana Spectre, 1 and 2 black for a 2/1 flyer. When it ETBs, each opponent discards a card from their hand.
And this card was a little bit less popular back in Mono Black's heyday. You could run this card, but several decks chose not to.
Yeah. This is definitely, a little bit more of a newer edition that wasn't as popular.
And I think its biggest weakness is that it's weak to Electrickery, and it's weak to Acacian Javeliniers, and it's weak to other Kumbah Witches and other Mono Black decks. Like 1 toughness is a huge liability.
Yeah. The good side of it is it does trade with Delver, non-negligible thing.
Yeah.
And it can chip in for damage
right.
if the deck you're against is all on the ground.
It's a disruptive threat also.
Yeah. Then we got 4 copies of Phyrexian Rager, 2 and a black, 2/2. When it ETBs, you draw a card and lose a life. So it's a gray ogre that does half of a Sign in Blood. Just solid, keeps the cards flowing.
A threat that replaces itself.
Yeah. Then we still have 4 copies of Grey Merchant of Asphodel. Now this is the big doozy. And prior to the printing of this, Mono Black was really just like a grindy resource denial deck that kind of finished out the game with like Corrupt and, chipping in with 2/2s. Grey Merchant of Asphodel is 3 and 2 black for a 2/4. When it enters the battlefield, target player loses life equal to your devotion to black. Oh, no, wait. It's each opponent loses, because I know this is relevant for multiplayer. Each opponent loses life equal to your devotion to black. So how many black mana symbols are in all the permanents you control?
Not counting lands.
Yeah, in the mana cost.
Yes,
Sorry,
yes.
I should clarify. In the mana cost. And you gain that much life. And that's the really important part, because if it just hit them, I feel like this would be a much worse card. Mm-hmm. But, if you have like a Chittering Rats on the board, Grey Merchant is a 8-point life difference. Like, you're gaining 4, they're losing 4.
Right. And it's a very strong card that enables Mono Black to stall the board and then win off the backs of their Grey Merchants.
It also helps, mitigate some of the life loss from assorted cards.
Especially Sign in Blood and Phyrexian Rager.
Exactly. It's a balancing thing, and it is a hell of a finisher.
And being a 2/4 is not irrelevant.
Yes.
And so the problem with Drake was that you were casting this 2/4 that drained your opponent, and Drake was casting, Drake on turn 5.
Exactly.
So that was one of the biggest problems.
Now this list also has one Gurmag Angler tacked on.
I think that's fine.
Yeah, I think it's fine.
It's a great card.
It's a 5/5. It's a big beater. You're casting it for a black, no more. Sometimes you cast it for more. You're rarely casting these guys for the full 7. So you're usually getting a decently priced 5/5.
And before we move on to the sorceries instance, I would like to point out there are no witches in this deck.
Yeah. So Kumbaj Witches, we should talk about. It's 2 black for a 1/3 tap, deal 1 damage to target creature player, and then the player or the creature's controller, if you targeted a creature, gets to pick something that gets dealt 1 damage.
Yeah. So this card was extremely good back when Delver was the most popular deck because it kills almost everything in their deck while providing a wall that blocks ninjas and adding to your devotion count. So it really was a very good card going into the Drake's era. because Delver was ubiquitously the most popular deck. And it's lost a lot of favor. A lot of people are saying it's a lot worse than it used to be.
Well, I mean, look for example at how well Affinity has been doing lately. Like Affinity, that card does stone nothing against. It doesn't.
It kills a Frogmite maybe if it blocks it.
Yeah,
that's about it.
Like
that Flare Husk maybe.
Yeah, like that's your top value for it, and neither of those are great situations. Like maybe it makes you lets you leverage a weird block better. But that's about it. Like, it's not good in that matchup, and Affinity is everywhere.
Yeah.
So let's actually move into the spells. So we got 3 copies of Disfigure, 1 black, instant speed, -2/-2.
Very good card.
Very good card. Kills a surprising amount of the format. Like 2 toughness is a decent chunk of the format, and a lot of people aren't really pushing for the 3 toughness versus 2. Like your breakpoint's really like the 3 versus 4, the lightning bolt test, right? So Disfigure, hits Delver, not to only talk about that card, but
let's be realistic. It hits Delver, hits basically everything in Elves. It hits basically everything in Boros tokens, though that's not a very profitable spell in that matchup.
But it lets you, for example, trade one of your 2/2s for selling an Affinity.
It kills a lot of creatures in Stompy.
Yeah. And then continuing on this trend, 2 copies Chainer's Edict. This used to be a 4 of. And I think one of the issues is aggro is just too good. You can't reliably get to 7 mana.
And we were talking before the show, a lot of cards that are very resilient to removal, Young Wolf, Eldrazi Sky Spawner,
all gaining popularity.
Yeah, are all cards that are extremely good against Chainer's Edict.
Yeah.
And
again, there's a tokens deck that's quickly becoming a tier 1 deck.
Yeah. And I've been playing a lot of Kuldotha Boros, and I can confirm that Chainer's Edict is not very good against that deck.
Well, you actually pulled off a 4-1 with that the other night, didn't you?
Yeah.
Nice.
Not a 5-0, but whatever.
Yeah. Copy of Echoing Decay. I think exactly for the tokens matchup.
Yeah,
so
this card is amazing against tokens.
Echoing Decay, 1 and a black, instant. Target creature gets -2/-2, and then each creature that shares a name with it gets -2/-2.
It also kills everything that's not core Skyfisher in that deck.
Yeah, and it kills multiples. That's the important thing. It's a
2-for-1.
It's hopefully. A 2-for-1. After a Battle Screech, it's a 4-for-1, or I guess a 1-for-1.
Yeah, battle. Yeah,
but you're getting 4 creatures off the board. Like, this is a silly card.
It's probably one of the best in the echoing cycles. The others are echoing truth, which is bounce everything, echoing ruin, which is destroy all artifacts of the same name.
The white one does enchantments, and the green one I think gives +1/+2/+2 to each creature with the same name.
But this one's one of the better ones.
It's one of the better ones. Echoing Truth does see some play, especially because that one can bounce non-land permanents. It's a bounce spell. It's like you can engineer a situation where it is really, really good for you. But Decay is definitely one of the ones that sees the most play. We got a singleton copy of Geth's Verdict, black. Target player sacks a creature, they lose a life.
It's an instant.
Instant. Yeah, that's the important thing.
Really only playable in the mono black deck. Most other decks prefer the one.
Diabolic Edict.
Yes, thank you. Excuse me.
Then we've got okay. So I'm gonna do these a little out of order. 4 copies Sign in Blood, black, draw 2, lose 2 life.
Yeah, and this has been a staple of mono black decks for a long time.
And it actually, it is target player. Like, it can be be the worst shock of your life.
That has happened to me.
Yeah, no, I mean
you lose the game before you draw the cards, right? So.
Yeah. Then we got 2 copies Victim of Night, black, instant, destroy target non-werewolf, non-zombie, non-vampire, I think.
Yes.
This was an Innistrad one. It's actually some of the most horrific art in the game.
It's like a dude bleeding out on the street. And
it's Innistrad's a dark place. Not good times there. But this is. Would you say this is better than Doomblade?
Yes, but that's only because it's better in the mirror for mono black, because in Doomblade kills stone nothing for mono black, whereas you can at least use this to kill Ragers and Rats. game one. So that's, and I mean, take that as you will. Maybe now that Mono Black isn't really as big of a deck, Doomblade and Victim of Night do nothing versus Gurmag Angler.
I was going to say, Mono Black might not be a big deck, but Gurmag Angler is still very present in this format.
So in Mono Black, I would say Victim is better. And other decks that are maybe splashing, Doomblade might be a little better, just because it's not black. Yeah, because it's easier to cast, but Victim of Night is probably the better card overall.
Now we've got an interesting one. 3 copies of Tendrils of Corruption. So Tendrils is not Tendrils of Agony. It's not the Storm card. I always get the two confused. But this one is 3 and a black. Deal X damage to target creature. Right?
It's creatures.
Yeah, it's just creatures. And gain X life, where X is the number of swamps you control.
And it's an instant. So this used to be Mono Black's answer to beefy threats.
Yeah. Because by the time you're casting it, like it's probably a drain 4 on a creature.
Yeah, you're at least killing like a Mirror Enforcer or a Carapace Forger.
Also doesn't care what you're targeting. It doesn't have any of the traditional black removal restrictions, like for ages, non-black, non-artifact.
It's a baby corruption that targets a creature and is an instant.
Yeah. Speaking of, we've got a pair of corrupts. Corrupt is the old finisher. 5 and a black. Sorcery. Deal X damage to target creature or player equal to the number of swamps you control.
Right. So between the Gray Merchants and the removal suite and then the Corrupt, that's how Mono Black was trying to close out games, was with these very heavy life swing creatures. So even if they couldn't finish you off, they were at least going to put themselves in a position where you could no longer beat them.
Yeah. I mean, that was always the big thing. Like, Gray Merchant might not make you unbeatable, but it puts your opponent back a turn and gets them a turn closer to being dead.
Right.
Especially because there is the annoying habit of Mono Black players, in my experience, of just going Gray Merchant, next turn Gray Merchant, next turn Gray Merchant. Like it always.
Well, it's like me in Affinity, right? They always have 2 Galvanic Blasts. You always have 4 Gray Merchants if you're on Mono Black. It seems
it's not even 4 though. Sometimes it's just like
5.
Sometimes it's just like 1, 2, and you're just like, okay, I can't win from here. Like,
yeah.
Now, interestingly,
if they only have a Gray Merchant out, you can Galvanic Blast the Gray Merchant in response.
Yeah,
and then they don't get anything.
That is actually an interesting thing that we should point out. Gray Merchant's ability does check on resolution of the ability. So if you can remove stuff in response, like if you have an instant speed edict or, a Galv Blast or a bolt or something, you can actually make the Gray Merchant hit smaller.
Right. For what it's worth.
Yeah. I mean, it's an edge case, but something that people should be aware of as to how that ability functions. It doesn't lock in the number of your devotion. All right. There's 1 enchantment in this, and it used to be that Mono Black had like a stock 2 enchantments in every single list, and those 2 enchantments were without variance Oubliette.
Right. Or Deadweight. Some of them ran Deadweight.
ran Deadweight.
Deadweight's very good against ATOG for those of you who don't know, because it just kills it outright.
But I feel like Oubliette was
Oubliette was by far the most popular one.
And for those who don't know, Oubliette is a weird
Arabian Nights card. That's one of the most expensive cards in the format. So maybe it's good that it's not that good anymore.
In paper, I think there is only 1 card that is more expensive than it, and I don't think you would know it because it's not good.
Is it Lotus Petal?
No, it's 3 visits.
What?
3
We're going to go on a tangent real fast so Mike can explain this card to me. I've never. Is this from like 3 Kingdoms or something?
It's from Portal 3 Kingdoms.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense.
It's a commander card. It's never seen print outside of Portal 3 Kingdoms. It's like $40.
That's why.
It's 1 and a green. Sorcery. Search your library for a forest. Put it into play.
My God, it's Nature's Lore.
It's Nature's Lore. Is that exactly Nature's Lore, or is Nature's
Lore
Lore
for a forest and put it into play?
Yeah. Because it's copy number 2 of Nature's Lore. That is why it's $40. But getting back to it.
Okay.
Getting back to it. Oubliette is a whopping like $28 in paper.
It's super expensive. It was printed in Arabian Nights and
nowhere else.
Yeah, nowhere else. It breaks the color pie rules. It's like a black exile spell.
It's a black journey to nowhere with this weird clause about how the creature keeps all like +1/+1 counters, no other type of counters if I remember correctly.
Right.
And auras attached to it.
Right.
But the big thing was it was 1 and 2 black.
Right, so it added to your Gray Merchant pips. It incidentally got rid of Rancors, which we were talking about earlier, which is relevant. Black traditionally has no interactions with enchantments. So Oubliette was a very color pie breaking card. Easily one of the worst cards of the deck, in our opinion. just because it was a sorcery speed removal spell, but it filled a very niche role that was really, unreplicatable.
Well, yeah, that was the thing. It wasn't. It was one of the worst cards in the deck, but it was also irreplaceable. Like there was no good replacement for it. But I think now people are coming around to the fact that it's not good enough in this current metagame.
Right.
And so instead, this deck is playing a one of, and it's Pestilence. And I love Pestilence as a card. It's like definitely a pet card for me.
Was it one of your first decks like Pestilence with Guardian of the Guild pack, so you always get to keep Pestilence?
I did tool around with that for a bit. I have tried to make Pestilence work more times than arguably I should have.
And so going about Pestilence, most mono black decks, and this deck is obviously newer, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's we're discussing the differences. Would run Unearth, some amount of copies of Unearth to recur their threats, as well as Crypt Rats, which used to be the Pestilence package for the deck.
Now, okay, so you've got some differences here in the two. Pestilence. So first off, let's look at Crypt Rats. Crypt Rats is 2 and a black, 1/1 rat, and you can pay any. It's got an ability X, spend only black mana on X. Crypt Rats deals X damage to each creature and each player. Pestilence is an enchantment, so it's already a little harder to remove. Not every color gets enchantment removal, but it's 2 and 2 black, so it's still adding pips for Grey Merchant. Comes down the turn before he does. Worth noting. And it has the ability black, Pestilence deals 1 damage to each creature and each player. So it works a little bit better. It's a little bit more forgiving with stack tricks. You don't need to like hold priority to like kill off young wolves.
Because the problem with Crypt Rats is Crypt Rats will kill itself.
Exactly. Now, Pestilence, in order to avoid being completely busted, has a clause. At the beginning of the end step, if there are no creatures in play, Pestilence, you sacrifice Pestilence.
Right.
Now, interestingly enough, this means the best time to use Pestilence is during your end step because that ability triggers at the beginning.
Right.
So actually, the best time to use it is your opponent's end step. So, you have your Pestilence out. You can wipe the board, but Pestilence would die. You wait until your opponent's end step.
And then you play your own creature on your turn.
Yes, exactly. So this card is very good in some matchups. It is a hard lock against elves a lot of the time. You also have Grey Merchant, which is a 4 toughness creature, which survives most of your needs. Like
the only creatures that beat out that are affinity creatures and Gurmag Angler. Oh, and I guess now Gearseeker Serpent. So
Gearseeker.
You have better removal for Gearseeker Serpent than Pestilence.
Yeah.
Pestilence, we were talking earlier, we think is a concession to the Boros tokens list again.
Yes. Works great against any deck that's trying to go wide with smaller threats. So it's also, if you can survive long enough against Delver, it works really well.
Stompy.
Stompy does not like this card.
Or even Red Deck wins.
Yeah. Most of their stuff is 2 toughness, right?
Yeah. So the problem with Pestilence is that it costs 4 mana. You would have to play it on turn 4, wait a turn. So like and it does damage to you. Like that's the problem with it is it's very slow.
Sorry. Did we actually touch on that? Both Pestilence and Crypt Rats also hit players.
Yeah, we might have left that out, but yeah, it
just to be sure, they both hit players. Relevant because Pestilence can be a win con. Like sometimes, like you stabilize enough with Grey Merchant, you're just like, oh, I can just fireball them out.
Right.
Land base, so easy. 21 swamps, 2 Barren Moors, and Barren Moor is the
black cycle land.
Well, specifically the black onslaught cycle land, because with Tron back in the meta in a big way, there's 2 cycles of cycling lands. There's the one from Urza Saga, where there's 1 for each color, and they cycle for 2 generic. And the one in Onslaught is 1 for each color, cycles for 1 of that color.
Right.
So in this case, it's if you don't need a land, it's a draw. It's a free redraw, right?
Right.
And if you do need a land, it's a slow land, but
it's a land.
C'est la vie.
And a lot of these lists used to run Bojuka Bogs also, which we talked about briefly. Just incidental graveyard hate. Although I don't know, we were talking also earlier about how maybe it's better for a mono list like this to not have any to minimize their amount of tap lands, and so
one of the other big things is in the past it used to be a deck that ran very few 1-drops, so you kind of cared less about tap lands if you saw them in your opener because you just go tap land pass. Like you didn't have a plan.
Yeah, you would go tap land pass, turn 2 swamp, witches. Excuse me, just got a little ahead of myself. And then turn 3, you'd play some sort of disruptive card. Turn 4, a removal spell. Turn 5, Grey Merchant was the ideal curve out.
It's actually like it's not like a very deep sort of curve out. Like it's a very simple and easy to understand. And this was actually the first deck I played when I got into Pauper because I feel like
It's an attractive deck.
it's an attractive deck, but it's also kind of one of those like easy to learn, difficult to master kind of deals where there's a decent amount of like play with respects to like figuring out sequencing and that sort of stuff, and being tricky with edicts and that sort of thing.
And we have a couple actually accomplished mono black players at our local meta.
Yeah.
Who one of them top aided the Pauper tournament we covered a while back, and one of them, they're both just very good mono black players.
Oh, definitely. Now sideboard, and I have one glaring issue that I'm going to bring up right now with this sideboard: 2 Relic of Progenitus.
Right, Nihil Spellbomb is better for a mono black deck.
Oh, you know what? We forgot to cover why that's bad. There's no Unearth in this deck. There is Grim Harvest. So rewind a little bit. I don't think we covered the fact that
we skipped right over the spiciest part, Mike.
We did. So Grim Harvest, for those who don't know.
And you should by this point if you have been listening to the cast for any amount of time. So
1 and a black, instant, return target creature from your graveyard to your hand, and then it has Recover for 2 and a black. And Recover is a weird mechanic from Cold Snap. When a creature you control dies, you can pay the Recover cost. If you don't, the card gets exiled out of your graveyard. If you do, the card goes back to your hand.
This card seems like it'd be really good in some sort of Sultai creature recursion deck with maybe Brindlebore and Trinket Mage. I don't know. I'm just spitballing here, Mike.
Well, so for a long time they used to run what was it? Death Denied.
It was Death Denied, but more recently it was Font of Return.
Yeah. So Mono Black has always run some sort of recursion thing. Unearth is a really great one because a lot of your disruptive stuff is at 3 mana. So 1 mana to kind of recur that is really good.
And at the worst, you could cycle it.
Yeah. Then Death Denied was X black, return X creatures from your graveyard to your hand. And that was kind of like, all right, I just need a bunch of stuff. Like refill my hand and give me like 3 more turns worth of gas.
It's sort of like Reaping the Graves without Storm. So a little weaker to counter spell, but a little stronger because you don't have to build up a count to cast it effectively.
Also an instant. So it was kind of like your end step. Either you counter this.
Reaping is also an instant.
Oh, yeah, Reaping is an instant. Although, to be fair, a lot of the rest of this deck isn't.
Right.
So, although I guess, that's right. Storm does count all spells, right?
Right. It's really 6 of one, half dozen of another. Honestly, I think it comes down to personal preference. With this spell, you might only be paying 4 mana getting 2 things. With the other spell, you might be paying 3 and getting 2 things. Like, I don't know if it really matters either way.
It's a weird thing. And I personally have advocated Grim Harvest in this sort of deck for a while because, you have a lot of incremental value and it gives you something to do with your mana.
Right. Yeah. Grim Harvest seems like a very good fit over those 2 other options or 3 other options. That third one, which was the enchantment.
Font of Return. Font of Return always struck me as a little bit weird.
I think they ran it because you could play it Grey Merchant and then use it.
Yeah.
Because it adds to devotion. It's all about the devotion.
but 1 pip. That's the thing. Like
I don't know. One whatever.
My bigger issue with it was a 2-drop. And on turn 2, you really want to be like Sign and Blooding or like removing an early threat that you need to. In the sideboard though, there are 2 copies of Relic of Progenitus. To get back to this, I don't like Relic in a deck where you have a graveyard recursion engine.
And the incremental is better. If you get both relics online, that's probably a best case scenario. But generally, if you want to pop a relic, it's a lot worse because it nukes both graveyards. And so in this case, I would, Nihil Spellbomb, you only nuke your opponent's graveyard and you still get to draw the card because you're playing a black deck.
Yeah, I would kind of prefer Nihil Spellbomb. That's just me. Also, Nihil Spellbomb, you do not need to leave the 1 mana open on your opponent's turn. Like, you can just pop it.
Right, you can just, it can just be a Tormod's Crypt.
Yeah.
But you do lose the incremental exiling. And the reason I bring up, if you have both out, that's probably good enough 99% of the time as opposed to nuking the graveyard all at once.
That's true.
Because two a turn is much more than most decks can keep up with.
Even against like a Tortured Existence or Dredgeless, like you're going to start exiling stuff they care about really quickly.
Yeah.
And in those sorts of matchups, you do always have the panic button where you can just go, okay, they're getting too much value out of this. It's going to hurt me, but it's time to hit reset.
And maybe that's not a reason not to run Unearths is if you want to go with a more aggressive Relic plan.
That's true. There is only 1 piece of recursion in this list, so, it does let you play Relic a little bit better.
Right.
Then we got 3 Duress, simple hand disruption.
Great card.
Great card. Yeah.
It'll hit basically anything in almost any pauper deck. There's almost no pauper deck that runs only creatures.
I generally will feel bad about siding it in against Affinity.
Oh, actually, well, if you duress them and you take like their prophetic prism and that's what they were looking for to get their mana going,
True.
That's fine.
Stompy actually
Okay,
is one of those ones where it feels okay. If you hit a Rancor, you feel like top of the world, right?
Yeah.
But
if you hit a Renegade Freighter, though,
if you hit a Renegade Freighter, that would feel pretty good. But if you're hitting Groundswell.
Yeah, I was thinking even worse. God, what's the name of that card? The Phyrexian +2/+2 card.
Oh, Mutagenic.
Yeah,
Growth.
Mutagenic Growth. Yeah, that one would feel pretty bad.
Yeah. So Duress, just really solid. I think it's the best targeted discard that we get in this format.
Right. We also have Distress, but that costs BB. So
yeah. Then we got another copy of Chainer's Edict. For when you need more edicts.
Right. There are some games where that's just a good card. Very good card.
2 copies of Nausea. 1 in a black. All creatures get -1/-1.
Also, Nausea confirmed better than Shrivel because Nausea has the art with the fairy tooting in the orc's faces. So that's the best one.
That has been brought up an absurd amount of times on this show.
That's my favorite. That's my favorite Nausea.
Is that a what's his name? Phil Folio special?
It is.
Okay.
I know how you and I feel about Phil Folio's art. I love it.
But importantly, this doesn't kill a lot of this deck stuff. It's mostly going to hit other decks that are running more X1s than you. Like the only thing that it hits in this deck is the Spectre.
Yeah.
And if you're getting 3 of their dudes, I don't think you care.
I also want to point out that I've been using Orcish Librarian as a bookmark.
Have you?
Yeah, it's my favorite one. He's eating a copy of Naked Lunch. It's hilarious.
I do like that one. That one's a good Phil Folio art. Then we got 2 copies of Wrenchbind.
Okay, yes.
Black. Target player discards 2 cards unless they discard an artifact.
And this is what we play because him is banned.
Yeah.
It's not online. It's not online in Moto, and most places house ban it in paper.
Yeah. And this card was at one point a big enough part of the meta where people would run artifact lands in their decks just to be able to discard it to this.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was to the point where people were actively doing something other mono black lists sometimes showed up with Vault of Whispers in them, even though they were running Corrupt, where actively non-bowing themselves just to not get mind rotted on turn 2.
Yeah. It's a hell of a card. Heck of a card.
Then we got another copy of Spectre, Liliana Spectre, double up.
I'm not really a big fan of sideboards that include more copies of cards that are in the main deck, just for what it's worth. But
I feel like with this list, it's less. It's kind of got a decent amount of 3 to 4 ofs, but they're kind of split main and side. So
yeah,
kind of
you can tinker around a little.
I feel like this is a sideboard where it's just subtle influences. It's not oh man, now I get to bring in my card that turns this match from a 10-90 to a 90-10. It's I'm going to bring in some cards so I go from, a 50-50 to a 55-45. And I feel like that's kind of how this deck has always been.
All right, that's fair.
Then we got so Tron is good, right?
Maybe.
I mean, it's been doing pretty well.
All right, sure, it's been doing well. Not with you, but
yeah,
ripping on Mike.
Yeah, the O2.
Maybe you should run more than one Rolling Thunder, Mike. Have you ever thought of that?
God, it's just the worst, y'all. So this deck runs 4 copies of Rancid Earth, which is a torment special. So Rancid Earth is 1 black, destroy target land. Threshold, so if you have 7 or more cards in your graveyard, it deals 1 damage to each creature on the board. So
that's not very good versus Tron.
So with Tron, you get to disrupt Tron. As we were talking about before, you saw this and were a little incredulous of it at first. And I was like, you've been playing Boros tokens, haven't you?
Blow up your Karoo, nuke your board. Seems good.
Yeah.
So the only problem with Threshold, of course, is that, there's only 1 Gurmag Angler, so maybe it's okay. But Gurmag Angler is definitely a nombo with Threshold.
I feel like maybe some of the matchups where you're bringing this in, you might also cut the Angler just because it's a little too slow.
Right.
Because this doesn't really have it doesn't have the Thought Scours, and it doesn't have the mental notes to kind of turbo the Angler out.
Right.
So maybe this comes in instead of those. And the other thing is, I just realized you could live the dream against elves.
What is the dream?
They keep the one lander. They go in, and somehow you manage to get enough stuff in the bin where you get to blow up their one land
some way
and wipe their board.
Yeah. You know,
it's okay to dream.
It must be nice to live in magical Christmas land.
All right. So the cost of this. So this deck is actually kind of cheap now that people are not playing Oubliettes and not playing the full Chainers playset.
Honestly, if you wanted to buy into mono black, the time where it's at its worst is the best time to do that because all of these cards have tanked.
So right now online from TCG Player, date of recording, the 11th of December, TCG Player, you can buy this in paper, $33. That's fine.
It's pretty cheap for a deck with 3 Chainers Edicts in it.
Yeah, those 3 Chainers Edicts are comprising like half the cost of that.
Yeah, easy.
And then online, Card Hoarder will sell you this for $9.40.
A pittance.
Yeah. And this has always been pretty cheap online, right? Except for the Kumbah, which is...
Unearth is a little expensive as well.
Oh, that's right.
But so it's not playing any of the expensive cards. Even Oubliette is like a little... I mean, I
thought Oubliette was like $1 or $2 online.
No, it's more than that. I can't remember what it is right now, but it's not a cheap card.
But
it all got printed like a Master's Edition or something.
Yeah. This set... this version of this deck is pretty cheap. It's got most of the stuff. It's missing some of the expensive stuff from other versions of this. But a lot of these creatures do have some level of crossover to other decks. There's some like Grey Merchant, which doesn't really show up in other lists. Shooting Rats occasionally does. Rager occasionally does.
Maybe it's time to start thinking about unbanning him.
No.
Okay. Please.
My issue with him isn't that it's too strong. It's that it creates really terrible feeling situations for players. Right. Like I don't think on its face it's a very strong card, but in Pauper where card draw is a little bit more expensive and not quite as great, and it. Here's the thing: it's always like even if it hits the 2 worst cards in your hand, it still feels pretty bad.
Right.
So. All right, so we've kind of talked about like the spicy inclusions, like Grim Harvest, Pestilence, no Oubliettes. Why isn't this deck good anymore? Was it ever good, or were just a lot of people jamming it?
So 2 sides to that argument. More people playing a deck will prop up the results, but not to the extent that Mono Black was doing initially, in my opinion.
Okay.
Because those people still have to 5-0.
Yeah.
Right, for it to appear on MTG Goldfish. So I do not believe that is as overinflated as some people might think.
Okay.
I think that the metagame has shifted just way more aggressive. Mono Black's kind of a slow deck. And since the metagame as a whole is a lot more aggressive, the deck suffers. It also suffers because its best removal spell, Chainers, is not as good as it used to be.
No.
Its threats are pretty negligible, even outside of, Grey Merchant.
Well, I mean, what does Grey Merchant matter if your opponent kills you turn 4?
Right, exactly. Its threats and its removal just don't line up very well against other decks.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the big things is main decking a Pestilence is kind of admitting like, my other removal is not well suited for a lot of like pertinent matchups.
Right. And I think that Mono Black really punished like mid-range decks most of all.
Well, it is. There's been some debate about like if Mono Black Control is the right way to refer to this deck because it is kind of a mid-range deck.
Right. So it really punished like other random. It punishes kind of nonsense decks. Right. And by that I mean like
decks that want to like dirtle around and cast Muldrifter.
Like good stuff decks that don't really have a cohesive game plan but are looking to win around turn 8.
Yeah.
So
because it did that but better. Like
right.
Grey Merchant is just a great win con for that style of deck where you're just kind of sitting around saying, I don't know how I don't know what I'm gonna do until like turn 5 besides like play removal and draw cards.
It was also very good versus decks like Boggles, for instance, that were solely focused on playing one threat.
Oh yeah.
So
To the point where like I have seen weird tech in boggles for Mono Black.
Colony Garden is the most popular one.
Colony Garden's popular. I've also seen Fists of the Ironwood.
Yeah, which creates sapperling tokens to run the edict effects.
It's an aura that makes tokens.
But and so to answer Mono Black, where are the decks? Where are the decks that Mono Black used to prey on? Where is Boggles? Right?
Boggles has been doing okay in the meta, not amazingly, but it's been putting up numbers and certainly more than Mono Black has.
Right. I'm just spitballing here. I think really that I think the matchups that Mono Black used to do well in are just not around.
And I think more importantly, some of the ones that were bad for it. Like you've played a lot of Affinity. Where do you like as the Affinity player? Where do you put your odds against Mono Black?
Honestly, I think they're closer than you would think. Because what am I trying to say here? I would put it about maybe 60-40 my favor, depending on the pilot, of course.
Mm-hmm.
But if they like so Mono Black has more. If they have more disruption than I have threats, it can be bad. Is what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah,
I don't
think it's unwinnable for the Mono Black player. Right. I just think that's a firmly like. I would classify that as a bad matchup for them.
If I go like Frogmite, Mirror Enforcer, they probably can't beat that. That's a lot.
Probably.
Yeah.
Because then so that's like what, turn 3-4 somewhere in there.
Yeah, and they edict. I sack a Frogmite. They have a 2/2, and I swing in. They block.
Like their best is like disfigure Frogmite.
Yeah. Also, they're a deck
like
that's
edict.
They're a deck that's very soft to a Tuck Fling combo.
Yes, they have absolutely like zero way to interact with that unless they like snap off like a quick tendrils early on.
Yeah, well, but if you have an ATOG out, if you can do it all on the same turn, they can't beat you. They could tendrils their own creature, I guess, but
that is a line.
Yeah.
But in the great scheme of things, like I think it's totally right.
It's a tough matchup because my creatures are stronger than theirs.
Yeah, and I think like their out is playing hand disruption that can actually get rid of stuff like duressing you to try and hit a fling or thought cast or prof prisms.
Yeah, and the other reason it feels good is because I have like Crypt Rats almost feels like a non-issue because I have so much incidental card draw on the deck that like sure you can put something back on top and I'll just draw 2 cards next turn.
Chittering Rats, not
Crypt
Rats.
That's what I meant. Yeah, Chittering Rats or like I can cycle a star, draw the card, and then take a draw anyway. Draw the card I was going to draw.
So
anyway.
I was talking with some people, and they said that the real judge of if Mono Black Control is a good deck or not is how good Crypt Rats feels against the meta. And I think right now there's a decent amount of decks that either are fast enough, a la the Boros Tokens list, where Chittering Rats is not fun, sure, but
that also
I feel like you can have an opening 7 that can just kill.
Right, and that deck's for having a bunch of 1/1s, the threats in that deck do feel very robust because you're constantly drawing cards and what's it called? Battle Screech has flashbacks, so you don't have to overcommit to the board with it.
Yeah. So I definitely think that Chittering Rats is not in a great situation because we have a lot of decks that are drawing a lot of cards and a lot of decks that are drawing cards a little bit better than Mono Black is. Like,
right. A deck with Muldrifter.
A deck with Muldrifter, a decks running like compulsive research. There's no equivalent in black for any of the blue cantrips. And I think that's one of the issues is, looking at Mono Black, a lot of players just go, why don't I just put blue in this? Like, why don't I just splash a color so that my draw is better and I have other ways to interact with other decks?
And we were talking about this earlier, how Angler Delver is sort of what comes up then, because now not only do you have a more diverse threat suite in Delvers, you're also able to turbo out your Anglers, your Sultai Scavengers, and you can rely on the blue cantrips, and you have Counterspell backup.
Well, that's one of the big things about Angler Delver is some builds of it can play the control game. Like, they can just sit back and counter stuff until they can resolve an Angler, and then just bash face with it. Or they can do the thing where, you go turn 1, Mental Note, turn 2, Mental Note, Swamp, Angler.
Right. And then, so I think that deck is sort of, we talked a little about this earlier. I think that deck sort of is more geared towards being the Mono Black deck than the Mono Black deck is, just because its clocks are so much better.
Yeah. And I think,
and it doesn't deal with the devotion plan at all.
I think another thing to think about is the concept of the crucial turn, like Modern, is supposed to be a turn 4 format. Like that's when things start mattering. I think Pauper is currently a turn 4 format. Like you start playing stuff that really matters around turn 4 in a lot of decks. Like, not to harp on it, but Boros tokens, like if you hit that turn 4 Battle Screech, I feel like you feel pretty good about yourself.
Yeah, well, especially turn 4 Battle Screech, flashback Battle Screech.
Yeah.
Like that's 4 power in the air. It's going to be tough.
Yeah, especially, and like if you're holding a Rally the Peasants, like next turn that represents, if you flashed it back, at bare minimum, what?
Well,
five creatures +3/+3. That's
it's turn 4. Can you have 6 mana on turn 5?
no. I'm saying like just once.
Oh, okay.
I'm saying like a single one. So that's
and
5.
Mono Black.
That's 15 points of damage.
Outside of Echoing Decay, cannot interact at instant speed very well.
Yeah.
So or against a large amount of creatures.
Yeah. And if they stick the Pestilence, you just play cautiously with that deck, right? Like you don't overcommit.
Right, and I played enchant removal on the board, so I might, which is good. So yeah, Mono Black. It's a deck that people used to play and don't play any longer, and I think that I think that at the end of the day, its good matchups just aren't around anymore.
So I think part of the thing is like we all saw like the rise of Drake, and we were like, okay, when this gets banned, things will just return to normal. And I think the thing that we definitely did not appreciate was the fact that like, no, the meta chain, like it was legal long. If it had been banned after the first chance, or even the second chance it had to get banned instead of getting emergency banned, I think Mono Black would be still around, because the meta just sort of devolved to this point where it's like, are you playing Drake or are you playing an aggro deck that can beat Drake?
And so now people are still, playing all these aggro decks.
Exactly. Like it had enough time where people started making decks that don't really care about Mono Black.
And so for better or for worse, we'll be feeling the effects of Drake for a long time. And for better or for worse, it really shook up the meta. Probably for the better. The meta was a little stale, and that's good. We want to live in a game that's evolving.
Yeah.
We want to live in a game that's fun as it evolves. And I think Drake, eliminating Drake, we kept the evolution, but we removed the unfun element. So I'm still happy with the banning. But, my theater teacher used to say, at the end of the play, you've left the old reality, you've entered the new reality, and you have to build a new base going forward because the old reality is gone.
I like that. There was a quality quote there. We're bringing a little bit more to this podcast.
He was a great theater professor, and he's actually the main reason I got really interested in like absurdism and stuff. So, shout out to him.
So, here's my question: where does Mono Black go from here? Like, so you brought up Angler Delver. Friend of the show, Alex Ullman, has been a big proponent of Marasa Black, which is
right. Is Mono Black actually still a Mono Black deck? Is the big question, right?
which is a weird sentence to say, but it's something we've got to consider now. It's like, do you want to go say, maybe I splash in white and put in like Skyfisher for reusing my ETB effects, or I go red because I get access to Burn, which is a little bit, more economical in terms of its
also removal. Then you get cards like Terminate.
You get cards like Terminate. You get Trickery out of the board.
And something Alex said really resonated with me. Are we married to the idea, and this was about a different deck, that Jund has to be red, black, and green, or is Jund an embodiment of an ideal where you're playing the best cards on the curve? Yeah. And so is Mono Black... does it have to be black, or does it just have to embody the idea that you're playing sort of a controlling mid-range deck?
With like a really solid finisher that actually closes out the game.
Right, and that's why earlier I mentioned I think Kuldotha Boros might be closer to what Mono Black used to be, where it plays a very robust removal suite, and it plays threats that are a little kind of hard to deal with, evasive threats.
Yeah, and then it has the finisher, except in this case instead of Gray Merchant,
it's Rally.
It's Rally the Peasants
or Bolt Galvanic Blast.
Yeah. Deck is good.
Yeah. So I'm sure that's not that cannot possibly be a 1-for-1 transition here, but I'm just saying, like, does Mono Black embody that ideal, or does it have to be a Mono Black deck?
Yeah. I mean, so you could splash blue and get like sort of like, I guess, like a leaner version of Teachings. Maybe you splash for control counterspell kind of deals, and maybe even, hear me out, Cavern Harpy.
Gary's Bounce House?
Yeah, I've seen lists that do that, but they kind of go more towards the combo end of things.
But talk more about the Marasa Black
Okay.
list, because that's really the interesting one I think that he's been working on.
So Marasa Black, the main thing is it keeps a lot of the core elements. You know, you've got your Ragers, your Rats, your Gray Merchant. But what you're splashing for is mainly Pulse of Marasa, which, to remind people who haven't played in a while, I guess, because this card is literally everywhere, 2 and a green, return a land or creature from your graveyard to your hand, gain 6 life.
The best black recursion spell is a green spell. You know, Tarmogoyf's the best blue spell. So,
but then you look at the sideboard and you got stuff like Wickerbow Elder, which gives you game against enchantment based decks and artifact based decks.
And it's just like another example of like a utility creature that is popular in these kinds of decks.
You get access to all sorts of enchantment and artifact removal, which is something that black at common. And actually, most rarities,
black's not supposed to be able to deal with enchantments very easily.
Yeah, like you do not get very many options at all. So basically, it's saying mono black has these issues. It doesn't deal well with artifacts, so affinity's a bad matchup. And saying like, okay, let's splash green. Let's put in a creature that's a 4/4 that eats an artifact.
Well, it's a 3/3 that eats an artifact that becomes a 4/4.
Yeah,
technically, but
like what you're trying to do is basically saying. Mono black is a boat with a hole in it, and you're trying to figure out what you want to patch it up with.
Right.
And maybe people have gone back and forth on trying to make a Rakdos control list. Black red.
I think it has something to do with Bleak Coven Vampire. I think that's where that deck has to go.
Bleak Coven?
But then why don't we also splash blue so we can play Mold Drifter? It's just this whole series of conversations of people trying to define this archetype. But I agree with you. I think red black is probably the closest thing. If you are married to the idea that mono black has to be a black deck, I think red black is probably the way to go because it also adds the removal suite.
Yeah, and again, it's very much like.
And Beetleback Chief is gas. So
yeah, it's very much the fact that I feel mono black is a bit of a misnomer because it is a controlling mid range deck,
right?
And I think those decks still exist. I just think that mono black is no longer the best of those,
right.
And moving forward, people kind of have to deal with that. And
but if you still want to play Rats, you still want to play Rager, then I do think that the Rakdos control list is something to look at. I do think that this green-black list is something to look at.
There is also that blue-black flicker deck, which is a bit combo-y. So for those who don't know, this deck plays Chittering Rats, so ETB puts
Ratlock.
Yeah. So I think that this was present before. We're making reference to Saffron Olive.
A modern deck.
He made this modern deck, which used Chittering Rats in a very similar way. I forget the exact list of cards. But basically, if you can recur or flicker a Chittering Rats on your opponent's draw step after they have drawn, you can lock them out of ever drawing a new card again.
Right.
And how it does this in Pauper is Archaeomancer and or Mnemonic Wall, Ghostly Flicker, and a Chittering Rats. So you just get infinite flickers, not in one turn. You just get to keep reusing it.
Right. But if your opponent, especially if they're Helmet and they're drawing the same card over and over again, basically unless they can answer the rat the turn you play it or the turn you flicker it, they can't ever answer the rat is what it comes down to.
Yes. And it's not a fun deck to play, I imagine. Basically what you do is as the player of this deck, and I have a feeling I'm going to put this together because I just want to see if it's real or not. What you're doing is you're flickering on your opponent's draw step, the rat and the Archaeomancer / wall, getting back the flicker, and then you're slowly beating them to death with 2/2s. And
sounds like mono black.
Yeah, I mean, it's mono black without the big finisher. It just has this this hard lock where you can't interact with it. Your outs are having graveyard hate already. For example, if the top card of their deck is a Fairy Macabre, that just fizzles this combo.
Right, or if it's a Thoughtcast or something, then they can potentially draw out of it into something else.
Thoughtcast is a sorcery, isn't it?
Right. Oh, if they're hellbent. If they're not hellbent,
yes,
eventually they might be able to, if they have a draw spell on top, they could put another card on top, use the draw spell, and hope to draw into something.
I'm thinking that with this deck, you kind of want to not go for the combo until
you've counter backup. You have deprives and counter spells, and
yeah.
You're playing a control deck with this weird finish.
Yeah. I don't know. It's just it's weird. It's weird to say it, but like mono black might no longer want to be mono black. Like I think the benefit of having a more steady mana base is kind of getting reduced by the fact that like there are glaring weaknesses with this deck, and it no longer, is as well suited for the meta as it used to be.
Right. And although all of our lands come in tapped, so do everyone else's who's playing a multicolored deck. So you're not really at a disadvantage. For 2, you're not as much of a disadvantage as if you are for 3.
Also, big point. We've got Ash Barrens. And
Yeah.
Ash Barrens is actually really good fixing in this format.
And you can even play it in a 2-color deck.
Exactly. Outside of like landfall, I feel like in most decks,
Which is not really a deck.
is not really a deck, but outside of like decks that care about landfall, I cannot see much of a point of running Terramorphic Expanse and Evolving Wilds anymore.
Because I have the F&M Evolving Wilds, Mike. That's why.
I really hope...
I didn't spend $10 on those each to not play him.
Okay. I actually really hope that we get a foil Ash Barrens at some point as an F&M promo.
Oh my God, my eyes just made little money signs.
Here's the thing. I don't care what I would have to do. I would grab a playset of those and then one for my cube because I really want better art for it.
Yeah, it's kind of meh.
And foil.
Yeah,
like
me too.
I feel like a good Ash Barrens art in foil would be gorgeous. But my point is, splashes are less. They require less of you now. So the fact that you can, splash red in your mono black deck a little bit easier makes it a little bit more attractive.
And in the Boros tokens list, I'm not even running anything like that. There's just enough red white lands.
Yeah,
and I'm running 4 prophetic prisms, which also really helps. So,
maybe Prof Prism is also the answer. Mono black wants to be playing a draw spell on turn 2. And if it's a draw spell that helps you hit your splash, maybe a couple of Prof Prisms do the trick.
Prof Prism is a great card.
There's also the question of like, is it worth it to run Metal Spinner's Puzzle Knot?
That's a good card too.
So for those who've forgotten, 2 mana artifact. When it enters the battlefield, you draw a card, lose a life, and then it has 2 and a black. Sacrifice it, draw a card, lose a life. Part of the
it's basically the artifact version of Sign in Blood.
Yes,
a little more expensive.
It's more expensive overall, but it also lets you delay the life loss, and it kind of lets you figure out when you want the other card.
Yeah.
Because sometimes if you're not having the quickest of games, Sign in Blood can result in you discarding cards, and not a huge deal, but end of the day, any advantage you can get in this game, Pauper is very much a game of inches a lot of the time.
Right.
Like, you're just kind of like fighting over like minor advantages. Yeah, it's weird. It's weird to live in a world without mono black because it's since I have been playing, it has always been like a tier 1 deck to varying degrees.
Mike, I guess you have to learn to accept the new world order here.
It's a deck I've piloted to 4-0s at F&M. Like it's a deck I have a lot of warm, fuzzy feelings for.
I've never really been a mono black pilot, so I cannot empathize with you. If Affinity suddenly stopped being... Well, if the format has to look a lot different for Affinity to suddenly stop being good, so...
I'm going to tell you one thing right now. If they reprint Gorilla Shaman and it drops to like $1 online, Affinity's going to get a lot worse.
I do not think that the price of Gorilla Shaman is what makes Affinity good.
It's not all of it, but the fact that the best counter for the deck is like $18 online.
I just don't. I mean, yeah, but I don't know, man. I don't think it's. I don't think it's.
How many times?
If people really want to play Gorilla Shaman, they'll play Gorilla Shaman.
That's fair. I'm just going to throw out like in Mono Blue Delver, how many times do we see 5-0 lists before the reprint of Days where they had like a force spike in them?
All the time. It was the best deck in the format.
Exactly. But I'm saying, sometimes budget is a concern for people. And
this is a conversation for another day. We're coming up on time here. All
right.
I'll take us out to the ball game.
Yeah, wonderful.
Thanks for joining us today. Check below this video or the description of this podcast for details on where to find us. We'd like to remind you that you're listening to this. If you're listening to this on a platform with reviews, they're always appreciated as they boost our visibility. If you've got a deck list or idea for a topic, feel free to contact us either via our website or by emailing us directly at colorcommentary@gmail.com. Special thanks to Pat's Games and L and
also Aaron Kane
Yes.
and his amazing deck boxes.
I was actually just about to say it. So great minds. Till next week, this is Adrian and Mike, and we are signing off for Color Commentary.